Ah yes, America's finest industry. We meet again. Now am I talking about the trains or the sugar? I guess we'll never know. Welcome back to the Sunshine State Rails. On a 2-hour drive south from Sarasota, under a coat of fog that was almost blinding, resulting from the humidity that should not be here at this time of the year, in my opinion at least. December 12th, we'd be making a run down to the U.S. Sugar Railroad's trackage down in the cane fields of Clewiston. You already saw what we're going for. The fairly newly restored vegetable oil burning steam locomotive number 148. This humid December morning, 148 would be in charge of hauling the Lake Placid Limited, U.S. Sugar's first ever passenger excursion train. Advertised online and tickets selling out within 25 minutes of posting, the Lake Placid Limited was set to run on this Sunday, December 12th, leaving at 10 a.m. from Clewiston on a round trip between here and the Caladium capital of Florida, Lake Placid. The U.S. Sugar Railroad's main purpose is to use their fairly wide fleet of general-purpose locomotives and to run out into the millions of acres of sugarcane fields that surround the sweet, sweet town, and to bring that harvested cane back to the Clewiston mill where it's all processed into sugar, which will find its way into just about every common food made in America. Today's Placid Limited would consist of 3 cars, the newly restored Palmdale and Miami Locks, and perhaps most notably, the Georgia 300. We'll talk a bit more about these cars once they reach Placid later today. Though it's hot and humid and no one else would know it unless they told you, it is December. And what is December? Besides the blatantly obvious, it's the middle of harvest season. So sugarcane jobs, not primarily on the route that this train would be taking, but out in the cane fields in general, the revenue cane trains would be running all around, but it looks like this first one was to dodge them, as they would stop and wait for the excursion to pull out and leave. It's about quarter to 10 a.m. now. The track that the train was loading on was a stub end, so they would have to back out of the fenced area to get onto the main and out of the yard, as the heavyweight Georgia 300 creaks off of the spur track and out onto the main line, only about a minute or two away from track speed. Moving around the corner to W.C. Owens Avenue, pretty much at the exit of their north shops, the 148 would lug the train out, destination Lake Placid. And though this locomotive doesn't burn coal anymore, vegetable oil or coal, carbon oil or water, steam is steam. And steam is powerful and loud. US 27 would be the main highway for following this train to Placid, and the road that we'd take out of town, and the first crossing that we get stuck behind the train at. But now I've got a dash cam, so not too big of an issue. Plenty of rail fans lined up already. The roads throughout this stretch would vary and the track would wind throughout the cane fields, though track speed along this route would be 40 miles per hour, and with US 27s varying 45 to 65, it would all work out in the end. We knew that just up the train's path they were about to make a left turn, so we'd make a right turn onto State Route 720, one of the main roads that winds out through the middle of the cane fields. And the railroad crossing about a half-mile down that road would be where we'd set up for our next spot. And they're already trying to hit that 40 speed. Two words of advice for you if you ever take one of these roads at a speed higher than 40. Keep a damn firm grip on the steering wheel and a right foot ready to hit the brake pedal. These roads are uneven, cracked, crooked, bouncy, and the curves out here are very sharp, and not to mention what looks to be makeshift speed bumps that looks like they were laid by the neighborhood watch kids. Definitely use high caution when driving on these roads, and I would never recommend taking one of these at night. Such would probably explain why there was nobody on them besides us. But after a couple miles of this makeshift pavement, we make it down to another railroad crossing which was again intersected by this road. Pulling off to the side with just a few feet to spare before one of those deep old ditches, 148 was right on our tail. Back on some federally regulated pavement, our next stop would be the town of Moorhaven. And just about everyone who came in for this shot, up or back, went for the shot on the river. But I didn't feel like joining that crowd, and frankly, we didn't get there in time to join them if we wanted to. So the crossing just north of the river on 1st Street would have to do. And it did pretty well.
Tell where the first class guys ride.
A handful of miles later, and US 27 swings across the tracks from the west side to the east side. And it was at this giant crossing that just about everyone would pull over for their next shot, myself included. And this straight stretch is what screams steam and what makes 40 mile an hour seem like 60.
I don't need to narrate this part. Just check out the crowd of people. Wonderful.
This next stretch would be something a little different. On a stretch between that crossing and Palmdale, US 27 parallels this track almost perfectly, making for an almost ideal pacing stretch, and I'd do my best to take advantage of that while we were here. My only piece of criticism, cut that brush, y'all. And the next shot on Broadway Street, just on the outskirts of Palmdale, as 148 smokes it up across the town border. back to side by side. It's interesting to be pacing a train without the sound of a Gevo prime mover 40 feet away from you, but I think it's more interesting to be pacing a passenger train with people on it who can wave at you, and many of which you did. I'm gonna send another virtual wave through my voice here. Now just on the outskirts of Lake Placid, 148, now following the route of Old State Road 8, rounds the fields of Placid Lakes and across Bear Point Lane. Just missed the Welcome to Placid sign on the dash cam, but downtown was only a mile or two out now, pulling down through the palm trees that now separate the road and the tracks, and pulling off one more time. Welcome to Lake Placid. From a block away, 148's whistle echoes through the town, sounding almost identical to the Polar Express. But today, the Sugar Express would be in town, pulling down Interlake Drive down to the Lake Placid Historical Depot just as the train arrives at the same time we do. At 12 o'clock noon, the Lake Placid Limited finally arrives at the Lake Placid Historical Depot. The train will be laid over here for 2 hours for people to take a tour of the museum, and that was about it. This small siding at Placid, having likely not seen a passenger train stop here since the late 70s, is now repurposed and will likely in the future see regular limited trains hosted by US Sugar stopping here to keep the history alive. Now that the train is here and stopped, let's take a closer look at the cars in our train today. The US Sugar Railroad has never been a passenger hauler up until this point, meaning that all the passenger cars in their shop and in today's train were all purchased and brought down from other areas. The first two cars in this train are now owned by US Sugar, with car number 1 now being the Palmdale. Originally built in 1952 as a Pennsylvania Railroad diner car, its original name was the William Penn. It was run on the PRR until the late 70s when it made its way into Amtrak's operations, and some point between then and now being sold into private ownership, and sometime between then and now was bought by US Sugar earlier this year. And after arriving in their Clewiston shops, it was re-stenciled, repainted, and refitted, and is car number 1 on today's Lake Placid Limited. Car number 2, now the Miami Locks. This one originally built as a lightweight baggage car in 1955 for the Santa Fe, merging into Amtrak's fleet in 1971. Renumbered from 3764 on the Santa Fe to 1251 on Amtrak, it too was purchased by US Sugar earlier this year, and after it arrived in Clewiston, the baggage doors were taken out and the car refitted on the inside and is now an open air car, with no seats inside, a standing open air car to accompany the Palmdale. And on the very bottom, this one on lease to US Sugar, not owned by them, the Georgia 300. This car's colorful history brings it all around the United States, hosting presidents of the decades, and now on private ownership can be leased by these rail companies such as US Sugar for special passenger excursions like this. This car was present on their 2020 Santa Train, and the same was true for this year's Santa Train, which ran the day prior, and now the Lake Placid Limited. Enough about the train, let's get a quick look inside the Lake Placid Historical Depot, which is now owned and operated by the local Historical Society. There's no way that I could start to explain all the stuff in here because there's so much from so many different time periods, but in a nutshell, the Lake Placid Depot hosts a plethora of artifacts of both American home life and railroad life. Old license plates, state tags, kitchen appliances, telegraphs, and essentially most of the stuff that you don't see in modern society today. This was destination for the Lake Placid Limited, and the folks on the train had 2 hours to explore this tiny building, or just to stand outside and gaze at the train. Although that wasn't exactly preferable, because it was now 84 degrees and humid in the middle of December. 2 hours later, just prior to 1400. They've used the tiny siding here at Lake Placid to run the engine around from the north end of the train to the other, and will now pull the train tender forward back to Clewiston. Setting up for the departure shot on Interlake Drive, it brings back quite a bit of nostalgia personally, and much of the reason why this excursion excited me. Lake Placid was one of those family vacation towns that I was familiar with from years ago. Back, say, 2015 and prior, my mom, grandma, and aunt, and me if I felt like going, would make a run to Lake Placid, if I remember correctly, in the middle of July for their yearly Caladium Festival. Lake Placid is where many different types of caladiums are commercially grown and or sold, and every year or more back in the day we'd come out here to get a look at that event. And obviously at some point during those events we'd mosey down to this exact crossing here at Interlake Drive and the Lake Placid Depot. Back then, the siding that the train sits on now was completely overgrown and not used, nor did I have any idea what trains ran on this line, and if any did, when they did. So essentially, it's cool to see a train in one of those towns that you never thought you would, and who would have thought that the first train that I would see here would be powered by steam? Go figure. Though 5 to 7 years later, I figured out pretty much everything I would have needed to know back at that time about this line, and other than this excursion nowadays, the traffic that this line sees consists of a round trip 3 times a week up from Clewiston to the CSX interchange yard at Sebring, just a handful of miles north of here. As of currently, that job runs Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, not on weekends, which is, surprise, surprise, when all of those Caladium festivals were held. On the road again. Oh boy, off we go, south again. 148 having no slower of a speed, now being tender forward. Barring downtown traffic and lower speed limits than thy, we'd make it down to a dirt road crossing that has no name, back off of Old State Road 8. And everybody rushing to their positions. Just about every crossing on the way up and back had somebody with a camera pointed at this train. Good luck to y'all, I'm out. And at the very bottom of the State Road 8 parallel stretch, The dirt Blueberry Hill Road would be where we'd end off the chase and the day as a whole. It was tender forward all the way back, and the light was good, but I just didn't feel like making the run all the way back down to Clewiston just for something tender forward. Maybe that's just a me thing, or that wasn't the best decision, but judging by how long the video already is, I'd say it was a decent choice. Besides, I had already gotten my filling of 148 for today, and I was more than pleased with the results that I had obtained. There will be plenty of other videos out there, however, of people on this chase who did make the run all the way back to Clewiston, and those who will have been riding this train, so I encourage you to search around and find those videos to both support those channels and see the videos in the event that you would like to see the run to Clewiston. But the bottom of Highlands County was all for us. U.S. Sugar plans to turn this into a fairly regular tourist operations down in the cane fields. Hopefully when more information comes on that, I'll be able to get out here and make another video like this one about that. So I appreciate y'all for tagging along with me on this adventure down to the Florida cane fields. I'll hopefully see y'all very soon. And a final thanks to everybody who did make it out today for this train for making the day extra fun. And a special thanks to my friend Richard for helping me out with much of the information regarding the rail stock and locomotive on this train. And in Highlands County, Florida, this is Kotabeaner, and I'll see you next time on the Sunshine State Rails.
And just like that, it's like no one was ever here. No train.
No rail fans. Nothing.